The following program is intended for an adult audience. It may contain adult themes and strong language. This program is separate from my efforts or those of any guest with any other agency or institution, public or private. It is intended to provoke thought and discourse and improve how humans can educate one another. My guest today is Mr. Rudy Escobar. Rudy is the STEM and Computer Science Coordinator at the Stanislaus County Office of Education. He was originally a chemical engineer by education and training, and he worked in the private sector before beginning his journey in education. As an engineer, Rudy has a trained skill for systems-based thinking and for arriving at implementations and interventions which have the broadest impacts. In our conversation, we explore the broad topic of artificial intelligence and its implications in pre-K through 12 education, including the risks and the advantages of not just embracing AI tools, but using them to one's advantage to improve the quality of teaching and learning. This is the Grand Unified Podcast, a production of Links Learning Labs. I'm your host, Jake Schulke. To support us, please subscribe on YouTube and check out any links in the description. We also appreciate your likes and follows on all podcast platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And now, while there's still time before the rise of the machines, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Rudy Escobar. So Rudy, you are the STEM and Computer Science Coordinator at Stanislaus County Office of Education.
Yes.
Okay. And in that position, you work with like schools throughout our county, pre-K through grade 12, doing all kinds of STEM and comp sci kind of stuff, like engineering and NGSS stuff and all kinds of things. What could you say to elaborate on that?
So that's actually part of what I do. It's besides that, I do a lot of consulting with administrators and to build strategic plans for incorporating STEM, science, CS into different areas, especially thinking about the long term, not just a fun and activity and let's finish it. So it's really trying to implement a way that kids will be engaged, but also to be able to learn through computer science or through science more extensively around these topics, and then maintaining in a way that they can really increase their knowledge over time, and for teachers to also continue to maintain that path along the way.
I love that. It's awesome. Well, I know I've worked with you personally, and I appreciate all of the support. I'm glad that a resource like your expertise is available to help being a newer science teacher. It's huge. Your educational background started in a different country, so you have like a engineering background, chemical engineering
background with computer science training as well.
Okay.
Then moved here and then got a chemistry degree as well, and then also computer science again involved into it. Then also a master in STEAM as well. So continue adding up to all the other things that I'm doing in education.
Okay, awesome. What so you did undergrad at Universidad de San Carlos de Guatemala, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what year did you move to the States?
In 1997.
In 97.
1997, yes.
Okay, so what brought you here?
Okay, so what brought me here? My ex-wife.
Okay, if it's too personal a story, we don't have to go there.
Yeah, it is my ex-wife brought me here. She gave me a choice, and I think it was a blessing. It was a blessing. I ended up in this country following a path that I wanted to follow, and I didn't really need to move. I really miss my country, but because she had said that she wanted us to move, I chose to move because my son was going to be born as well. So then I chose to move, and I ended up here.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you feel about how it worked out?
I feel good. I mean, I think that everything happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So although I would love to go back, I have gone back, and I would like to have opportunities to go back and do some of the work I do here back home. I actually have some really good friends that are actually doing some really cool work out there with technology and AI especially. So I tend to connect with them. I presented one time for them as well. So it's really nice to hear that it's happening out there, and being able to reach out kids that are not really that don't have the opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I really would like to see happening.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
very cool. And then you did your master's at San Diego, right?
Yes.
Okay.
University of San Diego. Yes.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
How was that, doing a master's in education?
It's actually pretty good. I actually waited a long time to get a master's just because I was looking for a master that would really be meaningful to me. A lot of people during the time I was in the classroom would get the master in education or some type of connected to just education itself or leadership. I think it was the other one that was out there. And I waited. I waited until this one came out. And it was a good experience. I cannot deny that being a USD graduate is a good experience. A lot of loans, but it's a good experience.
Sure.
But just the fact that the learning that happened there, NGSS was starting at the moment, so it was very fresh. We had some NGSS conversations and CS as well, and also the pedagogy and the opportunity to think outside of the box was great. And then just the experience itself to be able to start looking into other lenses. I still keep contact with some of those, my classmates, and the things that are happening in their areas, and where they're impacting in different areas. And that's the cool thing about USD and the team that we built there.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Sounds like an awesome network.
It is. Yeah.
Very cool. So you taught high school.
I taught high school.
For how long?
For 13 years.
That's a long time to teach high school.
Yes, yeah. 13 years. It was hard to leave the classroom, to be honest. It was very hard to leave the classroom. I laugh when I tell the story that even I had withdrawals my first summer because I needed that just the fix of being with kids and being able to talk to kids. And every year I would say, okay, this is my last year. Then somebody would graduate, will be graduating. So I'd say, okay, I'll wait for them to graduate and then I'll go. And so I kept on thinking that way. Parents would talk to me and say, wait, you gotta wait for my child to graduate. But the reason why I really, what made me think about moving was, I was impacting a school, I was impacting a district, but I wanted to impact more. So when I started thinking about how can I impact more kids and more teachers, that's when I started thinking, okay, this is the time to move. So it's a good opportunity for me to impact more. And that's been my goal. The more I move up, the more I can impact teachers and students, which is really what this whole career is all about, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So to broaden your reach.
Broaden the reach. The more, every time I hear a student or a teacher saying that there has been impact of what I have done, is not about me, it's about them. And for me, that's what really pays off. Mm-hmm. Just hearing that there has been impact in their lives, or in, when I see kids graduating and, having success in their venues, it's just really cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, your reach is way broader than it could be just teaching one class of kids. Definitely. So I know you just got back from lecturing at a conference. You're getting ready to go lecture at another conference. Then I'm going to see you at our local conference in a few weeks. And at all of these, you're talking about stuff related to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, not all of them, but some of them.
But some of them. Okay, it's one of the top. What else are you going to be lecturing on?
Well, we're continuing with phenomenon-based instruction and thinking about how do you use local phenomenon. Right now, we have a project that we've been working on how to use a physical computing to collect data for a local phenomenon, especially thinking about climate action, and how do we actually use computer science to integrate into science and being able to solve problems through computer science. So those are the things that we're trying to reach out. We're also doing about what are some of the strategies that we need to have in the classroom to make a student-centered classroom in NGSS, and thinking about how do we get kids to collaborate, to have discourse, and really be engaged into the science through a phenomena-based instruction. So that's part of the conversation we've been having. Besides that, I always work with the microbits and all those physical computing devices. So we're trying to use it more purposefully in trying to do that. We have a Scratch conference as well that is coming up. So we'll talk about how to use physical computing in Scratch for creative coding, as well as how to make it for accessibility for students that need access for certain things. So we'll talk about that as well.
How fun.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I kind of want to throw out all these AI questions and talk about some of that stuff instead.
Yeah.
How'd you like get started talking to groups about the topic of AI?
Okay, so with the topic of AI, I am part of what is called AI for CA, which is a group that uh, it's a subgroup actually from CS for CA, which is the computer science from California coalition that is part of the whole state. That is the umbrella for all things that happen in computer science. So I am part of that subgroup that it started with Emily Tomfer, which is she's a professor now at Reach University, and she started bringing this group up, and we started working together into developing things about, first of all, making connections of how AI, what's AI, and how does it connect to computer science, and how does it connect to everything that we do. We were looking at it from the computer scientist world, not from the user world. So that's what our group, and now that group has expanded over time. We have more members now. We have superintendents now that are attending, and people that are really encouraged to just think about AI, have those conversations. So that's where I began part of my journey. But at the same time, I began my journey with ISTE, which is this conference that I was telling you about. ISTE-GM. It's called AI Explorations. It's a course that is given, and that was about 8 years ago. No, maybe not. Maybe probably about 5 years. 5 years ago, they started about 5 years ago with that organization. And that course, Nancy Blair and Susan Brooks were the ones that started that course, and I started taking that course with them over time, and I took it 3 times actually, just because I started with the original, and then I took it 3 times with the group, and it just became part of what I did with that same group. And before ChatGPT came out, I was invited to go to ST for a panel, and we talked about the things that we were already doing and exploring with AI in some schools, and some of the work that we were doing individually. And then ChatGPT came, and then it became so popular and famous. But we had been doing this work with both those groups, ST, GM, and then also with the AI for CA. We were already doing that work, and that's how I got started with it. And now to the point that I was a coach for this course, the ST, for 13 groups around the nation, which was pretty exciting. And in both groups, I get to work and also learn from amazing people that are in the AI world. And that gives me a good opportunity to learn more as well.
How cool.
Yeah.
Well, you clearly are going to know way more than I do about AI.
Oh, there's always learning.
Yeah, there's always learning. I'm just constantly now hearing more and more stuff from different people, like reading articles and hearing podcasts and talking to fellow teachers about not just their concerns, but like how they're leveraging AI for use in their classroom, or even at higher levels for decision making at even administrative levels. And I hope that we can touch on some of that. But for starters, I know some people that are going to listen to this are going to go, okay, what's artificial intelligence? Like, I heard of this ChatGPT thing, and I'm pretty sure kids are using it to cheat. But other than that, what is AI? So I was hoping maybe you could explain a little bit of like what artificial intelligence means, or is that the same thing as machine learning, or are they different? And like, so ChatGPT is like the most popular thing in the news and with people experimenting, and that's a large language model. How does that differ from other kinds of artificial intelligence?
Thank you. So that's a good question. So I think the best way to explain artificial intelligence, the easiest way to explain artificial intelligence is a way computers mimic what humans do. That's really what artificial intelligence is. It's a way that it mimics what humans do. Now there's 30 things that we try. Actually, there's 5 big ideas in education. AI K-12. It's actually an organization nationwide that talks about how do we teach students about AI, and we use five big ideas. So when we think about AI mimicking the behavior of computers, we have to think about perception. There's another one that I also, if I can recall, we have to think about perception, representation, how it's learning, and then also those natural interactions that happen along the way. So as any computer that simulates the behavior or mimics the behavior, it has to fit in within those places. So when we think about AI, we got to make sure that it has those features involved, and not just, for example, a big confusion all the time is, do automatic doors, are automatic doors AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people would say yes, because it opens and it closes by you stopping on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, because it doesn't have really a perception. It's just using a sensor. So that's kind of the idea of it. It has to mimic that behavior, but it also has to have that perception, the natural understanding, and also learning from the behavior as well. Then when we talk about machine learning is a technique. It's just a technique in AI that learns by itself. So the way I like to put it is, a programmer will have, for example, a very simple chatbot, and it will actually put a chatbot where it'll code it with answers that needs to respond to a user, and it'll respond. So we have a lot of those. The old chatbots like Alice was a one that you would input something, it will give you an answer back based on whatever the programmer made. But then now we have models that, which is machine learning models that are deeper than that. That now they're programmed that once they have enough information, they can take that information and they don't need the programmer anymore, and they'll learn from the same network or internal networks that are learning from that. And then now, even deeper than that, you have deep learning, which is now another technique that is learning from multiple networks from that machine learning and putting it all together. We're starting to get to that point now. It's still being tested on those deep learning models, but machine learning models like ChatGPT you mentioned is one that is there's so much data being placed on there that it's starting to learn from the user.
Mm.
And so I don't know if that explains.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. So machine learning is this process by which the computer, the program, the algorithm, whatever, it's actually going through data and learning from it, like learning how to respond. So in a chat bot, so a lot of times getting automated help online, like from a chat bot, you'll get a little question box like, was this helpful? Is that how that thing is learning in an automated way?
It's learning in an automated way, but it's not taking, if you notice a lot of the things that it helped us, it'll give you a response, and it'll give you a response based on what you put your input. But if you put something, it happens to me all the time, it's an error that hasn't happened much, and I put it on there, it will not give me an answer. It'll say, well, is this what you think? Because it's trying to assimilate whatever the programmer had put on there. According. Now, the difference between that and deep learning is that the deep learning model would take that information, input it in, find a solution, or maybe work with me with the solution, find the solution, remember that solution, and now input into its model. And now next time somebody asks, now it has that answer with it, and it keeps on learning without the programmer inputting new responses. So the user is the one that is actually feeding that model. The learning, so it's learning from the user's input.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's very technical. But that's important to understand, because I know, so I'm at a middle school, a junior high school, and surely the use of GPT and other utilities has been happening before teachers started recognizing it, because kids are very smart and they love to mess with things. But I know that like now it's like a lot more teachers are noticing it, that students are using for a number of reasons. And one is, to cheat on my homework, to help me write my essay or answer my paragraph question or whatever. And we're able to check it. There are plagiarism checkers that, the old plagiarism checkers would just comb through all the papers and essays and web pages that are online and look for matches with the text. But now there are plagiarism checkers that check against ChatGPT to see like, well, what would ChatGPT write and how similar is your submission to that? And so we're noticing like kids are using it for sure. And it's worrisome for me, not because I mean, yeah, it's not great that they're not going through the steps of understanding the information in order to formulate a response. But it seems very clear watching them use some of these tools, they don't understand what the tool is doing. They don't understand like what it was the same with Google. Like all the kids think, oh, I can just type all your stupid test questions into Google and it'll just give me the answer, so I don't have to learn anything. And that seems precarious. Could you comment on that? Like, what does that seem to be a big problem?
I think the problem is I've heard of that problem a lot, but I think that it's also a problem of understanding of what really AI is and what it can do, and also part of the education of AI. I think that the AI education, computer science education, needs to be incorporated in every single subject, not just as a standalone. It needs to be part of it to understand what's happening with these models and to understand the ethics behind it. A big part of computer science standards is about impacts of technology and impacts of computing and impacts of and the ethics behind that impact. We tend to be as human beings to go on the negative side, then more on the opposite side. We have to teach kids not to do something instead of doing something. And I think that for us to be able to try to build a new society with a new environment that they're living in, which is AI, we have to first guide them into what is the right thing to do and how does it work and what is the purpose. Kids have been using AI way before we were. ChatGPT just made it, famous, but photo editor apps were already, or Photomath was one of them that was already on phones for a long time that kids have been using to solve problems. You have Snapchat now has new features that they can use. There's already things that are in their phones that they can have access right away before we even try it. Just going back a simple thing, what did kids used to do even before all of this AI happened? They would go to a YouTube video and try to find the answer. When the pandemic happened, a lot of kids were learning from YouTube. So there's things that are happening that kids will find a way to solve their problems based on the technology they have available. So I think that it's important for us as educators, as well as for the students, to understand the technology first and be able to see what is the benefits and what is the drawbacks from it and use them to our advantage. The system has to change. There's no question about that. If we continue to have the traditional things, it's not going to make anything better because technology is advancing way faster than we can actually catch up with it. And technology would end up solving issues that we can't solve them, but it might make them more efficient. And we have to teach kids how to use that technology more efficient and in a way to use it properly. Right? Because I think about, when I was in the classroom, Turnitin, I think it was, I had Turnitin, and remember that it would tell me 96% that it could be, not plagiarized. But then that 4% was in question. You look at it deeper, you would see why it was thinking that, and why it was thinking the 96%. Well, the same thing is happening with AI. There's a lot of right now articles coming out about there's bias between AI, those AI checkers, because depending if I'm a ELT, student, it might say that I'm plagiarizing, but it might not be, because it might be just the way I write that is not proper, and it's going to think that I'm plagiarizing. So there's a lot of things that we need to, as educators, understand. How do those tools work? How does it actually collect the data and get the learning data that is informing those models to be able to make the decision? I don't know if that responds to those questions.
Yeah, definitely gives me a lot to think about. I love that you brought up, you could call them older technologies. You could call them older, like YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube's been around for a while, but YouTube is how I passed my undergrad. YouTube is how I passed calculus and organic chemistry. And shout out to Khan Academy and Sal Khan for all the work he's done. Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, did my professors at that time know that was going on? How did they feel about it? Did they think that I should be paying better attention in class and taking better notes in lectures and reading my textbook? Like, no, I just need to learn this one thing. And so I'd go home and watch, a 9-minute Khan Academy video and try that problem over and over and over, and then try a different one. And then YouTube would notice the kinds of videos I was watching and then start suggesting, it looks like you're watching videos about the chain rule. Here's another video about the chain rule. And that's that kind of algorithm, like,
It's AI.
is AI, right?
It's AI. It's learning from what you're choosing.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody. When I think about a lot of people are scared of AI, right? Or how to use it, or we don't want our kids to use it in a certain way. But then, if that's the case, then everybody should stop streaming. Everybody should stop using Facebook. Everybody should, because it's embedded into everything you do.
Mhm.
If you ever see that there's I've had people that tell me, oh, I don't know how this got into my phone or how this got into my browser. I'm like, yes, you do. There's always something. There's something that you clicked that it actually takes you there, and now the algorithm has learned and is learning from your likes, and that's how it's gonna get you. So it's already out there, and there's, and the way I've heard this example before, calculators, right? When calculators came out, it was a big thing about how are they going to, it's going to do this for them and everything else. But I can learn how to press a button 2 times 2, but I don't understand what 2 times 2 mean. Then there's no purpose of that calculator.
Mhm.
And it's important for us as educators to understand that we need our kids to understand the meaning of AI and the purpose of AI for certain tasks, and not decide to ban it or to get against it, but really learn how it can properly be used.
What would be a good example of something a teacher could do in a classroom, like a lesson or activity to take me, like with middle school kids, 13-year-olds, like, how can I help them understand the way that some of these AI products work, like GPT, for instance?
So one of the things that I like to do with students when I think about middle school, and we just recently did with a very simple Scratch program, is for them to understand input output, right? So what's the input that I put on there? What's the process? What's the output? So if you actually have students understanding, when I put information in, what's happening within the model, and then what input gives me back. That's the first thing they need to understand. To understand that everything I put in is going to give me out. So if I put garbage in, it's going to be garbage out. So it's very important for them to understand that first thing in middle school. That is important to, actually, that should be understood even earlier. But that's one thing. The other thing is the ethics behind what's happening in AI, understanding the impacts and understanding how those models think. Because one of the things that students need to understand, and not just students, but educators need to understand, AI will never replace a human being because of the critical thinking, of the feeling situation. We started this recent session that we had just where I came from Philadelphia. We started it with putting them in a scenario where a car is actually going through, and there's 3 people. There's a dog, there's an elderly person, and there is a child walking in the pathway. And the car is actually programmed to save all the passengers inside. So the question is, what should the car do? Or what is the car going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes that's a good opportunity to put students or educators into the role of saying, well, as a human being, I'm going to try to save as many lives as possible. But if you crash the car, you kill the people inside. But if you run over a person or an animal or anything else, you'll kill one of them. What's the best choice? Mm-hmm. So AI makes choices based on what's programmed to do. And it will not see any other issues that are outside of its program. So students need to see that. And I think that's the opportunity for students to see at the beginning, how does the AI make choices? And it makes choices based on the logical model that is fed into. It will not make a feelings decision or a critical thinking decision. It'll be based on facts. And if students understand that from the beginning, it'll help them to make decisions and discern between, should I use this AI to solve this problem, or should I use this AI to make this essay? Is it giving me the right answer? They can start asking those questions about, is it giving me the right references? Or maybe not. well, should I actually ask that? But we haven't guided our students into that. We haven't guided them into really understanding the impacts.
So instead of limiting their access to this, ideally we'd be maintaining their access and just being a facilitator as they learn how to use it properly.
Facilitate the use it properly. I always like to always base it behind what are the implications, and what are the ethics, and what is it giving me out. Mm-hmm. That's important for them to understand, because it's not just about using the technology. It's fun, yes, it's fun, but besides just fun, if I'm going to put my personal information on there, where is that information going? And does that mean that everybody else? There's an article that just came out about ChatGPT. If you put in something there, and it's, say for example, write a dissertation on ChatGPT. ChatGPT most likely will write it, but don't be surprised if later on in another dissertation your verbiage is going to show up, because it got fed into that model. Mm-hmm. And now it's going to try to use it. And even though it changes a lot of things, mm-hmm. it'll still take some of the things that you have. So it's very important for students to understand that from the beginning, before they even use the tool. Because from my own experience, I've been seeing now there's a lot of companies out there. Now every company has an AI thing incorporated, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so cool, and you can do this, you can do that. But what are the implications to use it? What are the benefits? What are the pros? What are the cons? And what is the intention of the learning? Because if it's just to have fun, then there's no learning. But if it's to make your job more efficient, then there is learning.
I'm thinking through some of the teacher concerns, because we're telling people that, yeah, let kids have access to it, let them mess with it, let them play with it. So I'm gonna pretend to be your enemy right now. Uh-huh. Say, okay, well, I'm a teacher, and so me as a middle school science teacher, we've been learning about physics, about kinematics, about Newtonian physics, and I want my kids to come in and write in class, or as homework even, write an essay about Isaac Newton. Write me a 5-paragraph essay about Isaac Newton. And I'm terrified and nervous that they're going to cheat. They're going to use this ChatGPT thing to write their essay for them. What should I do?
So my first question about Isaac Newton, for example, my first question would be, can students research and find all the information about Isaac Newton on the web?
Yeah, easy.
What if you would give them the whole year to find this information and then write it? Do you think they could actually do that if you give them the whole year to write that essay?
Yeah.
So they're getting the information from the web.
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT can get the information for the web as well. What's the difference between ChatGPT doing it, getting all the information, and the difference between you having them the whole year researching for the information?
Well, I want their essay to show me that they've gained some kind of knowledge and understanding, that they've learned something about the life of this person, the devotion he had to his work and his education, learned about, him as a thought innovator, that he challenged the status quo of thoughts that existed about how the universe worked, that he made novel discoveries by doing experimentation. I want them to know about Isaac Newton's 3 laws of motion, definitely, and show me through their essay that they know that.
So to my understanding, you want them to write the essay based on their personal understanding and personal opinion about the facts of Isaac Newton.
Yeah, definitely. I want them to get some bigger ideas about it, not just reorganize information they found onto a new document.
So the reason why I asked that question is because what ChatGPT could be doing, I mean, obviously there's some flaws behind ChatGPT, but the difference between a kid, researching for a year and getting that information into an essay, and ChatGPT writing the same information on an essay, is just time. There's no difference between one or the other in the sense of timing. The other one is going to take it more time. It's going to be tedious. They're probably going to get tired, bored, and they don't want to do it anymore. Versus ChatGPT just writing all the facts. So how can I change this assignment to where they can use that information that they got from wherever, it doesn't matter if they did it a year or they got it from ChatGPT, into a more efficient assignment. So when I think about that, I think about, what if we were to ask them, based on whatever information you have, I want you to write your own personal thought about what Isaac Newton has done, and maybe give them pointers about, I want you to talk about this law, I want you to talk about this law and about this law, but I want your personal thoughts and your personal opinions about this. And what are some creative things that you can think about that Isaac Newton might not have mentioned? It changes the assignment completely, because now you personalize it into the student's view. And now they have to think outside of the box. Yeah, they can get the facts from ChatGPT, but they cannot get that input from their personal view. Even though you can tell ChatGPT, write on the first person, it will not get them the input. If you know your students, you'll know that person will not write that specific essay. So I think that is being able to shift it into a more meaningful way. We want our students to be more creative. We want our students to be more personalized, or learning to be more personalized. What best way to have them personalize what they read or personalize what they have, versus give me facts about Isaac Newton and write it on an essay, compared to now, I want you to tell me your own thoughts about Isaac Newton. What were what were your views on some of his best successes, or his failures? And now tell me, how would you transfer those success and failures into your own life? That changes the complete direction of that essay.
But that's hard.
It is hard.
It takes more work from me.
It is hard. It takes more work, but it's going back to the learning objective, right? So do we want students to recite facts, or to be able to personalize and think about how can they grow more in their learning? A good example that I always think about, chemistry, for example, right? I was a chemist for years outside of education, and I don't think I've ever in my life memorized all the elements in the periodic table. Now I remember the most common ones and their masses just because I used them so much, but I never learned the whole periodic table memorized. And we still have students being taught to learn all the elements, right? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of learning them all? Just to recite them faster? Well, AI can do that a lot faster than anybody else. We don't need that information. We don't need the information spit it out to us, learn it and memorize it right away to have it on the tip of our fingers. We already have it by AI. But what AI doesn't have is, how do I combine those elements in a way that is going to make a new element or synthesize it? It can give me models. It can give me models of predictions, but it doesn't have the hands to test it out and to see what some of the failures that can happen that are coming from error analysis. So there's multiple ways that can happen. It's just the way, it might take time at the beginning, but once students get into the routine, they're going to learn that there is a way to do things in an efficient way. But at the same time, they have to put in their own thoughts and their own input. And as a teacher, the educator has to step back a little bit. The educator has to step back and see that big picture. What is it that I want them to really take out of this?
That gave me an emotional reaction, and a good one, of honestly being, and people hearing this might not agree, but that makes me excited, because what you said is to improve that assignment, remove the lower level learning, your lower DOK stuff from it, redesign it so it's all higher level, analytical thinking, or even reflecting and showing your own personalized emotional responses, like forcing them to do something mentally with the information instead of just regurgitate it. And that makes it seem like part of the solution to adapting to AI is all the stuff AI can do for you. Take that out of the equation and focus on the things it can't do, which forces us to focus on higher level learning.
Mm-hmm. If you think about what is it that the big companies are asking for new hires, is those critical thinking skills that are required that a machine cannot do. That's what we need to focus on our students. We want them to be critical thinkers, computational thinkers, that they can analyze issues, problems, that they can really think about outside of the box for being more creative. So all those things AI cannot do. AI can get you there maybe a little faster, but it cannot do those pieces. And that's what we need to focus on. I like to always think about the example. Here we have it in Modesto now, but I don't know if you ever gone to a Bag of Crab. Bag of Crab is the restaurant there next to Costco.
Okay, haven't been there.
Well, so they have little cats. They're AI, so they're cats, and they actually bring the food to you. So they're little robots that bring the food to you.
Really?
And I went to another restaurant in Philadelphia that had it as well. So we had this conversation with educators. We all had this conversation about, so what's the purpose of that robot there? Is it going to substitute everybody else? So I like to always pay close attention to everything I see. And I started noticing the waiter. The waiter now has more time to talk to people. Is not running back and forth that an order got missed or anything else. They laugh, they talk to people, they have more relationships with people, and the little cat just comes in and brings the food. That changes the way things work, because in the old days, if you think about those fast food restaurants or fast paced restaurants, these poor waiters they don't have the time to talk to you.
No, they're
Some
rushing.
of them are bitter because they are having to rush all the time and they don't have time to do that. But now you have an AI robot system that is coming in and out, bringing the thing that the waiter doesn't need to spend time on. But now the waiter spends time on relationships with the people that he or she is serving. So I think that that's a good way to think about when we're in education. What are we teaching our kids to do? Do we want them to be more relationship, more critical thinkers, more building understanding, or do we want them to just be that waiter that is back and forth reciting facts and facts and facts and learning everything quickly? That's where I think about AI. It would be beneficial. Take away all the things that can be done, more efficient, and use the human brain to do the things that are required by you to become better.
That's fascinating to think about. That's great to remove all the basic stuff, all of the just bringing plates back and forth metaphor. Take that all out of the classroom and the assignments and the activities and the things that we waste time grading, and focus on. And I do mean waste.
Yeah, I was one of those teachers when I started, right? So busy work, right? How much busy work do we give kids because we want them to behave or to comply, everything else, versus what if they were to stay busy because they're thinking they can't let it go?
Yeah,
that's a good example is game design, right? How come they're a famous game, if everybody's as old as me, Zelda? Right?
Yeah.
If anybody has played Zelda, you can never end that game, right? Why? Because it learns from your actions. It learns from your actions. It has AI embedded into it. It learns from the actions you do. So if it's learning from you, it'll give you a different challenge because it's learning from the challenge that you came up with. That's the same thing that has to happen in education. We have to put in challenges in front of kids instead of giving them things that they can solve easily. Because whether we ban it in the classroom, they're still going to go outside and get it on their own anyway. I remember when I had they prohibited using certain things in my classroom, and I have some of these kids that were pretty smart, and they banned a lot of things happening in the classroom. They couldn't get in their computer and connect to certain things. Well, then that's when they figure out VPNs, and they were able to get VPNs and they were able to figure things out in the classroom. They figure things out no matter what. So we need to spend more time on educating them to use it properly, challenging them to get more creative and more critical thinkers, and be able to move along with them because the industry is already moving with them. Just education has to move with them along.
education historically has had a hard time growing up, developing. We're still doing a lot of things that are over 100 years old that didn't work then. But there are a lot of innovators, there's a lot of thought leaders out there trying new stuff. So for teachers that have never messed with AI, don't really know their way around it, but are interested in this idea of incorporating it in their class or encouraging kids to use it in a positive learning kind of way, provided that the kids have access to whatever they need. What would you say to that teacher that just doesn't know where to start?
I would recommend to ISTE, and I'll probably give you the website, but ISTE GM, which is something that I've worked with. They have guides for teachers.
Okay.
They have guides for elementary teachers, for teachers that are non-computer science teachers, teachers that are computer science teachers, electives, etc. And they have guides to how to get started with already standards embedded in there. So it gives them some. So that's a good opportunity to start.
Okay.
To start just kind of getting their feet in the water about what can do with AI. One caution, I think I go more for the do not do and then the do.
Okay.
Is be cautious about all these programs that are bringing in that companies are bringing in to use AI. So there's a lot of good tools out there that you can use AI. I'm not going to mention the tools, but there's tools that are coming in because they see you're an educator, so they're going to say, okay, use this AI tool because this is good. It's good for your students and does this and that. But we got to be careful what data we're putting in, right? Because there's no such thing as free.
Right.
Something is coming up. A good example, you have iReady, right? iReady is an AI adaptive system. It's actually, there's a vision that most of the things are going to become that way in the next few years. Learning, adaptive, marketing is going to adapt to your own likes. Everything that you purchase is going to be adaptive. So it's a good system. It's beneficial because it teaches, it adapts to the child into their learning, but at the same time that data is being collected.
Right.
And it's going to use that data for certain models. And how efficient is it? Who fed the first model is the question I ask. Because that's what we're having issues in certain penitentiary systems. We have issues in court systems because AI was fed by certain models in certain people and is being biased to certain groups. So I think that it is important for us educators to understand that first before we decide to choose a tool. To do that. What are the implications? What data is being collected? What are some of the what is it going to do with the data? And is it really being is it helping me to be efficient as an educator and my students efficient as educators, or is it just making them more lazy?
That's a big question. Not just about the student. Okay, that's good advice, and I'll definitely I'll link that stuff in the show notes so people can check out those resources on their own.
Yeah, I'll share it with you so that way you have that as well.
Perfect.
And there's a lot of education. I always go to, I mentioned at the beginning, so AI K-12, that's the organization that really is the first go-to that I would recommend any educator to learn about AI and how to teach AI in the classroom. That's the first one I would go to, and then there's several other people that are working on this, that alongside with me and outside of me that are working with this. But that would be the first thing that I would actually go to, and then the AI guides, the GM guides, is a good opportunity to start because that kind of gives you the simplified version. It's not your ChatGPT. It's not. That's not the type. It's more of understanding AI, in how to teach AI in the classroom.
Okay. Other thoughts for teachers, like what opportunities are there? Like we talked about some of the things that students can use AI for, and how we can incorporate students using AI. But how can a teacher use any of the AI tools out there to impact their practice?
Well, I think that some of the things that I've been noticing, and I'm not I'm more from the programmer side, the computer science side of it, not from the user side. But I've been seeing some tools out there that are pretty cool things that they do. So we have some of them that are like a quiz analyzers. They can actually, you can build a quiz and it can analyze the responses right away. When I think about a very quick feedback assessment, you can actually use some of those tools out there that can do that. That would be beneficial for teachers. Um, there's also, you and I have talked about, lesson design using ChatGPT or things like that. That's a good opportunity to use it. Caution though, just like we tell our kids, right? Just because it speeds a lesson plan doesn't mean the whole lesson plan is good.
Right.
So and I think that both educators and students, no matter what gets developed by an AI, we need to have our eye into it to be able to really be judge really what is it right and what is it wrong. So it might give me a lesson plan. It will get me started with the lesson plan. I just need to make sure that it covers everything I need to cover based on my standards. But at least it takes a lot of my time away from that full lesson planning that I would have to do, right? So those are things that I see. There's a lot of tools now. Again, I'm not going to mention the tools that are coming out now that are helping you build presentations. So slides, which is sometimes the hardest part, right? So how do I make my slides nicely? I'm one of those that can make very good slides. So how do you make the slides nicely that will be beneficial for our students? Put the images on there and all that. So there's tools out there that are actually doing that, so that you can just put in your prompts and it'll build the slideshow according to your prompts.
Wow.
So I think that those are beneficial for teachers as well. That will support them. Again, it goes back to the word efficiency, right? What can make the teacher more efficient? And thinking about the analogy of the waiter, right? How can you have more relationship with your kids if you're always grading and trying to build assignments and trying to build lesson plans? You don't have the time to have relationship with your kids. So what are the things that AI can do for you that will make you more efficient and have more time to spend with your kids in relationship building versus putting all this work in front of them?
Right. Or inventing busy work things for them to do so you can sit it and grade papers or enter data or whatever, to spend that classroom time with as many one-on-one interactions as possible.
And then have the things that AI can build for you. There's things that you can actually build assignments with AI as well now, that for teachers, that they're not gonna be your summative assessments, but there could be some formative assessment as well that can give you some data behind it.
Okay. And just messing with GPT a little bit, just to see what it can do. I found, for me personally, it's good at coming up with a rough draft.
Yes.
It's, especially if, some of my productivity blocks sometimes are like writer's block, just getting started, getting the first outline written, getting the first thing on the paper, or knowing the best place to start, instead of just starting anywhere and then editing it. And I've found GPT's like putting stuff into ChatGPT, it is pretty good at coming up with a rough draft, but I have to read it and edit it scrupulously to know, like, oh, this is good, this is bad, this doesn't make any sense, I don't know where it came up with that language. Because some of the stuff it spits out doesn't make sense. Sometimes it'll spit out stuff that is just strings of words, and I don't know where it came from. But that is what it does, right? It's just combing through language and conglomerating strings of words.
It takes everything from the internet. And puts it together in a more concise way.
Okay.
So whether it can bring in something from one side to another side and build it together. It might sound okay, but for a human to really look at it carefully, you're going to notice the flaws, right? You're going to notice the flaws. And I like that you brought in the rough draft idea, right? Because that's really, I've talked to some English teachers, and at first they were fearful of it, but then they started thinking, why not? Why not starting with use ChatGPT for a rough draft, and now write your personal view on this and write it more up. So I think that it's anything that we do with any AI, we need to understand that it's only the beginning of it. is not the final solution. And that's what we need to teach our kids. It's not ever the final solution. It's a starting point. It's a more efficient point, but it doesn't mean that it's a full response.
That brought to mind, I used to do healthcare quality assurance when I worked in emergency medical services, and I'd go through lots of patient care documentation and see that some people were really good at writing reports and some people maybe didn't take as much care with them or didn't understand the importance of it to the same degree. But the best way to make somebody a better documenter was to get them to review other people's reports. Because then when they're going through the act of looking for errors or looking for opportunities for improvement or better ways to say things or trying to understand if it was clearly stated or not, it would improve the way they would document by seeing errors in other people's documentation or room for improvement. And so having kids take GPT's rough draft and edit it to make sure that it meets all their qualifications and then even personalize it, I could see that being like you're skipping the first step of just getting pencil to paper and just writing a bunch of garbage and then going through and improving it. Like, well, let's start with a rough draft. And then does it make sense to rearrange these sentences? Or would you say that differently? Or is that true? Can you find the source to prove to me that's true? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to do work in that realm as well. Even with just facts, trying to see, challenge the facts, and always being careful of what we feed into into ChatGPT as well, right? Because I always think about, eventually ChatGPT is going to get so big, or any type of model like that is going to get so big that it'll start bringing in, depending on what you prompt it, it'll start bringing in two views that are way opposite together. And that's scary. That's scary when it starts. And if kids do not understand that, they're going to believe it's true. Right? And it's going to be scary when it brings in, for example, historical decision with a religious decision and bringing it together, and then now it puts it as a fact, and kids that do not understand how these models respond, they're just going to believe it as a fact. Right? And that's important for them to understand as well.
That is huge. I've seen that firsthand where they're like, no, Google said that this is the answer. And they think it's a one-stop shop for information.
And if you think about it, that's been, that used to be even when I was in the classroom, and we still haven't fixed that problem. And now we have a much more stronger technology out there that is doing that. And they haven't learned we didn't stop to teach them, make it a very important thing, understanding that Google doesn't always have the answer. Yes, as educators, we used to tell them Google doesn't have all the answers, but how many of us have put them into the spot of noticing and experimenting and exploring? What was the difference? Because I used to tell my students all the time, I say, well, okay, so if you think that's all the answer, okay, let's actually try to solve that problem. Let's dissect it. Let's see if it's actually giving us the answer. And most of the time they would find that the answer was not correct. But that's because we don't spend the time for them to explore that technology and really understanding the technology. So we have to make sure that we slow down and allow them to explore the technology to make sure that they understand what's happening. And as educators, we facilitate that conversation.
So slow down. Watch the kids work and think. Talk to them about their thinking. Make sure they're critically analyzing things. Ask a lot of whys, or is that correct? How can we check it? That's great. In thinking about stuff to talk about with you, I ran a couple experiments with ChatGPT. One was to ask GPT to write a bio for you, and it did not find a lot of information specific to you on the internet, so it just gave you a lot of compliments. So it had great things to say about you. So yeah, I entered in the prompt information about you. So your full name and your current role, thinking like, well, maybe it'll find bio information on different websites, networking websites and whatever, and conglomerate that information and come up with a resume. And no, it didn't. It just took what I already said about you and turned those into compliments and used some, came up with language to be very complimentary about your educational background and devotion to education. So that was a neat experiment to see, can this research a real person and talk about, and not a historical person, like a modern person. I also wanted to know what interview questions would ChatGPT come up with. And it came up with, I said write a list of questions, but I didn't say how many, and it decided 15 was the right number, which is why that doc I sent you was so big. Some of the questions, though, some of the questions were pretty good and things I wouldn't have thought about asking that maybe can give us a jumping off point to talk about where AI is headed. One good question was, how can AI algorithms and data analytics be leveraged to identify patterns and trends in student performance, thereby assisting teachers in designing effective instructional strategies?
So we talked a little bit about iReady, right?
We did.
So iReady is already doing that. It's part of what it's doing. I think that, and I'm not too familiar with how is it working in districts, but I hear it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I hear everybody's using iReady, right? And I think that that's something that, are we slowing down to look at that data? Right? Is the first question I would ask. Because yeah, it can adapt, it can do this, but am I really being able as an educator to see that data, single out that data from every one of my students, and being able to really understand what they're really learning and why are they learning the way they're learning? Because the educator is the only one that can do that. Not data, not the district, is the educator that is spending the time with their students all the time. Back to the waiter idea, right?
Yeah.
Is being able to be there and say, okay, if I already saying this about my student and it's reflecting this and it's adapting to this, where are the gaps? So those are so I think that that is a key. It's a key that is helping, and AI is helping on. But if I don't have the educator as the user and being able to analyze that data from the relationship perspective, then that's where I'm not doing enough for that type of system. I always look at an example that I lived on my own. I was always about, okay, why is it that this was the last time I did homework in my classroom? Because I was always, homework needs to be turned in, This was my third year, and so I learned quickly. And finally, I found out that one of my students actually was living in their car. So obviously they couldn't do their homework, and it was digital, right? That changed my whole perspective of what life is all about. Life is about relationships before content. And for me, if any tool is going to give you the opportunity to have relationship with your students, that's where you need to go. So when we talk about all these data analytics and all these things about it, yes, they're great. Use them. Let's use them. But let's actually reflect on the data. And as educators, let's use that data to be able to do that. Because there's no point of having data without analyzing it or using it to better education, right? I think that's the key. Back to, let's slow down and let's look at that data.
Look at it and really understand what it means.
Understand the data. Because if, for example, you have a kid that is not progressing and is adapting to it and is trying to adapt to it, but it's not progressing, what are the other factors around the classroom that are not making them successful? Right? It doesn't have to be just test data. There's a lot more than that. And how can I, as an educator, use that efficiency of AI to give me one little aspect of my student, but and me able to take that data and use the other data that I have on my personal basis and build this whole child profile of what that student is.
That holistic
holistic view of the child, right? Because test is not the only measure.
So instead of depersonalizing or over automating things, you're talking about using these tools to free us up a little bit and free up our minds to do that.
Critical. Now we want the students to be critical thinkers and computational thinkers. Now the educator has to become also a critical thinker and a computational thinker, because now the teacher has to analyze that data, dissect that data, be able to see if that makes sense versus what I know about my students in my classroom. And so it gives opportunities to be able to analyze a lot more at a deeper level than just assuming you're concerned, right? So
Hmm.
go deeper into the learning of your own students, and you become the facilitator and the relationship builder more than the one that's spitting out facts to your students, right? So it
Hmm.
becomes a student center.
A lot of our amazing teachers though don't have backgrounds in data science. Like you and I went to college and studied science, natural science stuff, and so we had to do a lot of math and statistics and data analysis and read all these scientific papers and even write things like that. And but not everybody goes through that same learning experience to focus in their area of expertise. So what would you say to those teachers that are like, man, this is just a bunch of numbers and I already spits out like where do I start knowing how to use all these data?
So I think that this is something that we all have to understand as we move along the way. But two important things to know is always the cause and effect and the patterns.
Okay.
All data has patterns and all data has cause and effect, right?
Mm,
So when you think about, can we at least start? If I'm a zero data person that has zero clue what to do, can we find some patterns along the
mm,
data?
mhm.
There's AI tools that now can find you patterns along the data that can support you. But if you don't have that, that at your fingertips, can you actually find patterns behind the data? Can we have, and I'm not too familiar with iReady, but can we have visualizations from the data, right?
Mhm,
Can you give me pictures?
mhm.
Because that's a good way to understand data and look at patterns. Start with something that helps that, and that's something that we need to support our educators to being able to visualize the data as simple as possible, so that way they can identify patterns. And once they identify patterns, I mean, I remember areas used to have this little graph on the side and it would say the trend of
Mhm,
the student.
mhm,
That was a factor because then I would look at every single subject of that child
mhm.
and see, okay, where is the hole? If everything is going up and one is going down, is it me? Am I the one that's failing,
Right.
or is it the student itself? What are the other things that are happening? So just looking at patterns is the best way to learn about anything. Just if you're not a data science or deeper into the science.
Okay.
Mhm.
So as a colleague or even instructional coaches, even administrators, to help teachers get used to analyzing data, um, you think just going through that practice of look at everything we can look at charts and figures if they're available, and try to notice patterns.
Yeah, I think I think that's going in basics, right? So there's a
Yeah.
lot more than that. But the basic thing is look at patterns, notice patterns. What are those patterns that are you identifying? Look at patterns over time. What are some of the things that you're noticing happening? We don't spend enough time on data. If in the year worth, and even when I was in education, I think we saw single one time or twice in the year we looked at data.
Mm-hmm.
How much would data tell us? Data is a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about quantitative data, but we also have to look at the qualitative data. We can't base ourselves just on quantitative data, so we have to look at both. But if an educator with their expertise comes in with that qualitative data, and now we look at quantitative data and we compare those patterns, we start to see a big picture of that child.
Mm-hmm. You point out an interesting fact that so much of the stuff that we notice about the child is data. We might not think of it that way, but we're collecting data about that kid every day.
Every day. Mhm,
Every
every day.
day. Oh,
If that child came in sleepy, there's a reason why that child came sleepy.
mhm,
So what's the data behind that? Did it sleep correctly? Did it not sleep? Was it playing video games? Was it not playing video games? All that is data.
mhm,
And that is a relationship data, because I'm going to interact with that kid and that kid is going to interact with me based on how exhausted that kid is.
mhm. Man, there's probably great opportunities for data analytics tools to be employed, especially in secondary education where a kid has 5 or 6 or 7 teachers that probably don't speak to each other directly about that individual student very frequently.
Mhm.
But if all that data could go into one place where it could be looked at, maybe only when provoked by something, but to be able to look and go, well, is he falling asleep in class more frequently? Or is she having more frequent trips out of the classroom, or difficulty focusing, or trouble getting along with peers, or different things, more tardiness or absenteeism. Because I mean, you mentioned like in the learning management system, like looking at trends in the grades, like looking like, okay, is my grade the only grade they have that's not doing well? Because that means it's a me problem, unless they just don't like my content area and I'm not.
Could be.
But then that's a me problem too, because it's my job to make it engaging.
But it could be, there's multiple things. It might be, the typical I hate math idea, right?
Sure.
They hate your class because they hated math all their life, and now they got to you. It's not just your fault. It's been something that is embedded in them over time. As educators, we'll try to do the best we can. So, but that goes back to the data, right? So, what am I doing now? Now you shifted towards you. Now is what am I doing right or what am I doing wrong that I can improve to be able to? It's not about right or wrong. It's really about what can I improve, right? Because there's always room for improvement. And I think that going back to the conversation of AI gives us the opportunity to be more efficient in that realm. It gives us opportunity to have more relationships, more opportunities to see those big things of the child that we might not have enough time, and we're spending all our time grading and building lesson plans.
Is that where you see AI in the classroom heading, to just teachers be using more and more tools as time goes on?
I'm hoping, this is not where I see it. I'm hoping, and I'm cautious to say using more tools.
Okay.
I think I would love to have the idea that educators and students are using tools that are going to make the life more efficient for their learning. So specific a tool, choose one tool, just two tools that will make things more efficient in the learning, but not tools that will make things just efficient, right? With no learning. It says more efficient with learning. So, in one or two tools that will actually move it forward. Because if not, we'll fall up into the pandemic idea again, right? 100 tools to use in the classroom. And what tool do we use? Now we're into this headache, right?
Yeah.
We have to be very careful of what tools are we going to use. Going back to the learning targets, right? So what are the learning targets of that lesson? What are the learning targets of the unit? If I'm going to use AI, what is the tool that is going to best help me to move this forward? If we do that, I would envision that would be the best way to use it. Not remove it, but using the tool only if it's going to make the learning more efficient.
Okay.
Or my relationship with the student more efficient.
Yeah. Using even some of the smart learning tools for like math, where kids can kind of self-pace themselves through independent practice with math problems, and they have these for science and other things too. Using it not as busy work, but creating opportunities for kids to self-pace themselves through learning, so you can have check-ins with kids, go over their work with them, work through challenges, difficulties, build a relationship. That's an optimistic thing to look forward to.
Yeah, and always being cautious. I think about going back to when NGSS started. I remember the old days where an engineering project, right? You have educators would grab a baggie, put a whole bunch of things inside, give it to the kid, and say, "Go build me something." That was the old, traditional NGSS engineering tasks. What would happen? The kids did not have a clue what to do, right? Or they would build something completely out of proportion, which it makes sense. That's okay. But I think that the educator cannot step away from that picture. The educator needs to stay with the facilitation. Just because now you have an automated tool that is helping your student learn or do something, doesn't mean that you sit down and go, spend time in Facebook or other things that you don't need to do. You really need to spend the time now building relationships, be on the shoulder of your student and learning from what that student is clicking. It might be that the student is just clicking because just wants to get it over with. So that's a good conversation to have with the student. Why are you doing this? Do you think it's not meaningful? So there's opportunities to have those relationships more than just stepping back and letting the tool. We tend to have that with a lot of digital tools. We leave them on their own, and then we expect the technology to solve the problem. And that cannot happen.
I agree. Having seen some examples of that behavior. I agree. It tends to have negative effects. I mean, some kids are very content being
Yeah.
autodidactic, like teaching themselves. They're, especially if it's a subject they like. Like if,
Mhm.
for example, if they like math, and they're like, yeah, 50 practice problems and I've got it, and I really don't need you to lecture to me or anything. Like I can just keep moving. Some kids are very content with that, and some kids, like you said, have already had previously challenging experiences with math, emotionally challenging experiences. And so they enter the classroom with that baggage, with that past, uh, call it trauma, an experience that shaped their behavior. Um, those kids struggle when they don't get that time with the teacher.
And I think that it goes back to universal design for learning, right? So the opportunity to have multiple ways of kids to learn.
Mhm.
You have kids that will learn on digital technology quickly and they'll keep on going and you can keep them there all day. Someone will not. And the opportunity for the educator to step back and being able to see that happening in the big picture term and being able to identify which kids really require my support and which kids will not require as much support but still need my attention,
Mhm.
and having the time to do that, because now you have something that is being efficient as supporting that work, and now you just being the facilitator, and it's a student-centered classroom. So now you're just being able to navigate to the issues that are happening in the classroom, the problems that you're having in the classroom, where do they need some social emotional support and things like that, which it shouldn't be a standalone. It should be happening in the classroom all the time.
Mhm. That's great. That's great advice for people. Like slow down, connect with the kids. I love it.
And I do want to say, not just educators, right? So, well, educators are administrators because sometimes educators feel pressured.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an understanding of a system. It's a system understanding that we have to all slow down. And yeah, AI makes things faster, right? But it's not that it makes things faster, it makes things more efficient if
Mhm.
we use it correctly.
Mhm.
And if we're going to use it correctly, that will give us an opportunity as educators to slow down.
Yeah. You got to go slow to go fast
Hmm.
sometimes.
Hmm.
I'm glad you brought up administrators, and administration of all levels. Like this is a concern for everybody, from
All the way to the top.
all the way to, yeah, like literally all the way to the federal level.
That's why right now we're having there's actually a lot of forums happening right now with AI and with the Senate being able to have these conversations about where should this go. There's an actual report, and I'll share that with you as well, about some of the reports that have come out about where should education go, how should we use education, some guidelines, right? We need some guardrails, otherwise it's going to go berserk.
Sure.
But this is already being has reached already government, and there is awareness and everybody's trying to figure out how to play. Again, technology is going way too fast, so we're trying to catch up in education as much as we can.
Hmm. What about just at a local level, say like just a school site, just a individual building, the principals, assistant principals, like what would you say to them about adapting to AI now permeating instruction and being available to students?
I like to so a few about a month or two ago, we had actually you were there when I actually was at the on the side doing that session.
Yeah.
um, um, at that session that we did with CDE about AI, um, I really liked Barbara Nemenko, which is the superintendent for Napa, uh, for Napa, Napa district, and she brought it up and said, we need to understand that technology is already out there. Our kids are going to go into that future. So how do we support this into our own educators in our own classroom? And it's really all about giving them the support they need to be able to start exploring.
Mhm.
I would always have to thank my principal when I was in the classroom. He might not know everything I did in the sense of my content level, but he trusted in to say, try it out and I will back you up.
Mm.
Try it out and I will back you up. That was for me, that made me become an innovator educator because it gave me the opportunity to step outside of my box and able to try things obviously with caution, right? So
Sure.
we always have to do things with caution. But it gave me the opportunity to be an innovator and be able to be more creative in my own classroom.
Mhm.
It gave me the autonomy to be able to be more creative in the classroom. And that made me who I am today, right? Because if it wasn't for that principal that would have that trust, and then I had district that supported me and have that trust, and then superintendent having that trust, that I could do, and I knew they would back me up no matter what would happen. If there was a parent conversation, they were there because there was a conversation where they knew I was trying something new and innovating.
Mhm.
And I think that that's what we need to do in our sites as principals, as educators, as administrators, just to be able to support our teachers, as long as it has some guardrails, right? So it's give and take, right? So if you're an educator who wants to try new things, but it's within the learning targets, with the learning objectives that is coming along, if the administrator can support that, then it might end up something that then you can share out to the rest of the school, and this is working. How neat would it be to have a conversation between English teachers, science teachers, history teachers, and say, hey, this tool I used and it worked really well for me for this, and
Mhm.
then the other one saying, oh, but this worked for me for this. Right now we're working with a project with the California Subject Matter Project. And it was interesting for me because we're trying to integrate computer science. And I bring this up because this was interesting for me. So when we decided on this, my head was going straight into science. And how do we use computer science into science? But then we had a webinar just recently, and we talked about these other subjects about computer science, and hearing these other subjects like art, PE, uh, coming in history, coming in with, oh yeah, I can use this data tool for this, or I can use this data standard for this.
Mhm.
Um, it just blew my mind because thinking about, if you don't have those conversations outside of your silo, you might not even think about those ideas, right? That you think about, well, it's only science uses data. I don't need data, right? And it might not be. It might be something that you might use, a tool that might work for you. So as administrators, give that opportunity for, again, relationships, relationship building, conversations, hearing from each other. We just gotta be careful because we know that in education sometimes if we just let it blank, some people leave and then you don't have a conversation. uh, but you want have really rich conversations, structured conversations where educators have the opportunity to share what's happening, what's going good in the tools they're trying out. If everybody decides to try, let's say, for example, ChatGPT in their subject as starting point, everybody come back in every subject and share what is working, and the administrator being able to be the facilitator of that work.
Mhm.
So giving opportunities to grow, right, into the new technology. Because if we continue to push into the old stuff that we're doing, teachers are getting tired, teachers are getting exhausted, everybody's getting exhausted, students are not paying attention, and then we have all these behavioral issues that we're worried about. But kids are just tired of being sitting for 7 hours, right,
Yeah.
listening and listening and listening. So it's important for us to be able to change that system.
Yeah. Do creative things, do interesting things, change it up, make it fun,
Mhm.
keep them engaged.
Allow educators to be also creative within guardrails, right? So I always
Yeah.
bring that up because you can't just give freedom, but give an opportunity to innovate. Become an innovators. There's a lot of teachers, a lot of educators out there that are willing to do it, but they're afraid, or they don't have the opportunity, or they don't have the time. Give them the opportunity to try something new, one thing to try new.
That's great. Great advice. There's a number of ways I could think of that being facilitated, like using staff meeting time to facilitate work groups that would have those conversations in a structured way. Like, it actually sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's cool to be able to see that. And it also be, I go back to relationships, right? So it builds a community of educators that are having the same goal. Our goal is our students.
Mm-hmm.
Even at the position that I'm at, my goal is our students.
Mm-hmm.
And if we all think to be able to collaborate to get to our students, it's the more we share what we're doing and how we're building it, the best we're going to serve our students.
Mm-hmm. That builds a culture.
It builds a culture.
It's really teaching in the affective domain
Hmm.
to do that, to facilitate those kind of conversations. So what about above? I know those school site administrators, those principals, those assistant principals, they have expectations put on them by their bosses, right? And so let's go a level above that to the central office, the district office level, to those administrators.
I think that goes back to the understanding, right? So the understanding and where you are obviously needs the support from everybody. It's a system. I like to bring Barbara as the example because she's the superintendent. So she brings down her own view and her vision, and that goes down into everybody else that is spreading around, right? So they don't see those limitations.
Mm.
I've seen it lately interlock with the STEM education, right? That in the project-based learning, that from the top is being encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
So then it starts to bring down to the bottom, and everybody's getting opportunities to increase, more opportunities for our kiddos. So I think that the support that is needed from above the site level is more to be able to bring in these innovating ideas, allow these things to penetrate. I'm blessed enough to see that happening in my lifetime in our districts, that are starting to see that administrators at the top level are starting to think about, let's become more innovators, let's become more technological, let's catch up. It's slowly coming, but I'm seeing that there are some of our districts in our county are actually becoming this. They want to be into that boat of innovation and bring in technology and bring in new ideas and having more opportunities for our kids. Unfortunately, they're also, hand tied by certain systems in the local, not local, but in the state level.
Mm-hmm.
We're tied to assessments to a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's some out there right now that I'm already seeing that they're trying new things and innovating things, and that's exciting. At least in my lifetime, is exciting.
Yeah.
That eventually that support is coming down, and I think that also educators need to see that. Every time I'm with teachers, I tell them, "You are so blessed that you have administrators that are supporting this work."
Mm-hmm.
If I'm out there with them, is because they are supporting the work, right? And I think that that's something that educators need to see. That if I'm getting this support, just take advantage of it and use it, and open up to more ideas to be able to get these things for our kids.
That is exciting. And you've interacted with people in other parts of the country,
Yes.
and even outside of the country.
Yes.
Does it seem like that's the common theme, that people are, at least in some places, getting excited about trying new ideas and trying new things? Or do you see a lot of limitations out there, a lot of hurdles for people?
I think there's still hurdles. There's hurdles out there. Be cautious about. Uh, California is not where it should be. I can say that.
Mm-hmm.
Being the Silicon Valley
Mm-hmm.
type, we are way behind the boat where we should have been. There's actually reports out there where California is actually one of the lowest versus other states, that in some aspects.
Mm-hmm.
We have some states already that are mandatory to have computer science in every the whole K-12, so in every classroom.
Mm-hmm.
There's other ones that are, having science, mandated, or things like that are. So we are a little behind in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that we need to be aware of, and not only aware, but be able to do something about it. Um, when we think about other countries, obviously, there's always the other side looks like a paradise. I always look at it that way. But I do like to think about some of the things that are happening when we think about the education in the UK or the education in Canada, for example. Computer science technology is huge. Mm-hmm. It's a mandated. Kids are doing innovating things, inside and outside of the classroom. It's that's part of their life. And I think that that's where we're a little behind to where our kids are still worried about our test scores, right? And not our kids, but we are still worried about test scores, and which it doesn't. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but I think that there's more opportunities for our kids to have opportunities outside of that. I'm in the business to having kids wanting to go to school and be engaged in school and have fun in school, not hate school not be engaged in school, and finish school without ever wanting to go back to school. Right? That's really, we want them to be encouraged to do that. And I've been in this country 26 years, and I still seeing the same patterns happening over time, and it hasn't changed. And we need to start thinking about what are the changes that other countries are being successful on. Now, obviously, they have their issues as well, their hurdles as well, but they also have some good success and some things that are becoming. When I see working with the Microbit Foundation, seeing those kids doing some innovating things around the nation and around the world uh, at the young age, kindergarten, San Bernardino, not going too far. There's a classroom in kindergarten that they're already doing programming, coding in kindergarten with a physical computing device. There's counties out there that are already doing a lot of things that are happening. So we just need to catch up.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's a lot to look forward to.
Definitely is. I'm hoping that's my retirement plan.
Very cool.
Yeah.
For teachers out there, or people that are curious about learning more about AI, taking the rest of their summer break to read a book or read a paper or check out a website, are there any other resources you'd recommend?
Yeah. So there's actually a lot right now. Google is actually putting some AI free courses about to understand their. So if you just go to Google I/O, you'll be able to see some of the things that they're coming out with. If you just like to explore, and that's how I like to do things. So just explore. Go to Google I/O, and then you can explore things that way. If you go to OpenAI as well, and you look and sometimes it's hard to understand their things, but you can see some of those images that are happening, out there. There's also, I can't remember. There's a name of one. Obviously, Coursera will have some of those courses as well to kind of like learn about it. Everybody's putting now a ChatGPT Learn module.
Oh, okay.
You just always be cautious on that. Just cautious because everybody is now becoming the expert. So we just have to be careful. I would have to actually search for those resources that I have, but I do have them, and I can send them to you.
Okay.
There's some out there that are that I would recommend to do, that are from people that I know that are legitimate, that are doing out their work. Obviously, the AI I recommend for the educators to apply for that. It's coming up. I think it probably in August, the application, and it's free for educators to go through the course. So if they get accepted, it's free, and it's a cohort. You build a cohort of educators to learn about AI as well.
Okay.
So I would encourage that as well to do.
Cool. We can get all those resources together and link them in the show notes for sure. You brought a book with you.
Oh yeah.
What's your book?
So I'm always reading about things on AI. There's so many good things out there, but one that we just did a book study on is The Big Nine.
Okay.
And I would recommend everybody to read this book. It's Amy Webb.
Okay.
Big Nine. And The Big Nine talks about who are the companies that are controlling AI, right? So when it talks about the Big Nine, it talks about the Big Nine here in the U.S., but there's also a group in China, and how they all come together to make decisions in things that are being taught to us. So it's a very, very interesting. It starts with talking about the history of AI. We're talking about AI now, but AI has been in our world since 1949. So it's been out there way before we even thought about it. We just didn't call it AI, or some things. Generative AI is more now, more proponent, but it's been over time. So it talks a little bit about that, but it also talks about how those decisions are made, and it's very interesting because Amy talks in. This is us actually in 2018, if I recall, when the book was written. And when you read it, you'll see that she predicted a lot of things that we're living now. She also kind of foresees what's going to happen in the future. So I would definitely recommend that book to read. It's very interesting too. If you're one of those that wants to really think about opposite side of AI, good and bad, it's good to read that book. It's really interesting.
Cool. I'll link that too. Awesome. I'll probably have to put it on my stack of reading to try to accomplish.
It's a very easy read, actually. It's a very easy read, but it's very interesting. It has some really good aspects of it.
Cool. Do you want to plug the local conference that you'll be that you'll be teaching at?
Oh, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I have not had time to look at that
At
conference
the
yet.
dates?
At the dates, I know it's coming on
End of July.
end of July.
The last week of July.
And I know that the AI one, if I recall, is going to be, and I don't know if it's going to be happening because they haven't told me if it's going to happen. But let me see.
I think that conference is July 25th, 26th, and 27th at
Yes.
Stanislaus County Office of Education.
And I just have to, if you're looking for the AI one, I just can't remember. One is in, I have a Scratches one. There's Physical Computing and Science. Did I have an AI? I probably did. Probably got to be the 27th.
Okay, that third day.
Yes, it's another. How can we benefit from using AI? So it's it's on the 27th from 2:15 to 3:45.
Okay, cool. And we can link that conference. If you're in Northern California and want to check it out, it's coming out real soon. Yeah. So hopefully we'll get this published in time for people to hear it. Rudy, thank you so much for coming and talking to me today.
Thank you for having me. That's exciting. It's a good experience.
Awesome, great. I'm really glad. It's fun for me, and it gave me a ton to think about. And hopefully other people will listen and noodle a little around and think about ideas and hopefully try new things.
Yeah. And anybody can contact me or follow me on Twitter. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me, and I'm always willing to have conversations.
What's your Twitter handle?
It's at RUD. It's actually at Rudy Kem. It's very easy.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's Rudy Kem.
Okay. All right. We can throw that in the show notes too for everybody. Thank you again for coming today, Rudy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that you enjoyed this interview and that you were leaving with something to think about, if not also some more concrete ideas for how AI could improve your effectiveness and your ability to connect with and support your students. Thanks for listening through the audio quality earlier in the video, as the air conditioner in the studio coped with a very hot California Central Valley afternoon. As of the date of this recording, I'm still recording in my home studio, which I'm continuously improving. To support this project, it's simple. Subscribe on YouTube and wherever else you listen, and of course, please share this podcast with other educators. If you're going to buy any books mentioned on the podcast in this episode or others, use the links in the description to help support us with your Amazon purchase. If you have any questions or would like to see certain topics covered, you can reach out to us on social media. Thanks for your time and attention. Happy teaching and happy learning.